Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Voices for the Mausoleum. In today's edition of Saturday Horror Movie Reviews, I am joined by Christina Wilder, who is someone I met recently on social media. And I'm going to let her introduce herself and just tell us a little bit about like what you do.
Hello, so I'm Christina Wilder. I have been a horror fan as long as I can remember. I'm a writer, actress, and would love to get more into filmmaking, that sort of thing. But I've written a few horror short stories that have been published, so you may have seen my things around here and there. So I'm trying to kind of get back into that. But
Yeah.
that is basically what I do. I love the genre. It's a wonderful genre, and excited to talk about VHS.
Yeah. I'm going to put all of Christina's information in the description for this episode so you can go check her out and see what she's doing on her side of things. So we're talking the 2012 found footage film VHS. And everyone is that watches me on a regular basis knows that I'm like a massive found footage fan. So we have VHS 99 that's coming out soon. And so this, like when you mentioned VHS, I was like, oh, now would be like the perfect time
Mm-hmm.
to talk about the original. So we're going to talk about VHS today. So currently, this came out in 2012. I said that, 2012. It's got a 5.8 out of 10 on IMDb, a 56% on Rotten Tomatoes, a 2.9 out of 5 on Letterboxd, and 80% on Google, which that's about normal for found footage stuff. Four thugs who make money putting their violent antics online are hired to steal a VHS tape from a spooky old house. However, things take a turn for the worse when they find a dead pensioner. I wasn't expecting it to say that. And dozens more tapes. I was going to say prisoner, and I was like, there's no R there. What is this word? It threw me off totally. Anyway, so yes, they go into a spooky house to retrieve a tape and things go awry. That's the short version. I'm also like, it's also very anthology based, which I love anthology horror. It's like something I'm like, if it's anything anthology based, I'm like all about it. So we'll do our ratings. If you had to give this a star rating out of like 10, what do you think you'd give it?
I know I have kind of nostalgic feelings for it, and I can get more into that. But
Yeah.
so I might be a little biased because you know how if you have like a connection with a film, you're always going to rate it higher because it means something to you.
Yeah.
But I honestly would give it an 8.
Mm-hmm.
Because of course it's not perfect, but it
Yeah.
it feels so real. It's so creative. There's different. They use found footage in different ways,
Mm-hmm.
and there's different stories. There's humor. It's
Yeah.
surprising, and you cannot predict what happens next for all the segments. It's
I agree.
every single one takes your breath away, and I can't think. There's really not too many things I can say that about, let alone films or found footage films. It's really an impressive feat. I think so.
Yeah, no, I'm inclined to agree. I'm a fan of the franchise in general.
Mhm.
And I think just to kind of add on to what you said, I think what's interesting is sometimes when you go into anthology horror, especially when it's lumped into one film, you
Mhm.
tend to start seeing patterns in the stories or things start to become a little predictable because they fall into this like routine with their stories. And that never happens in first, definitely not the original, but I don't think that happens in any of the VHS films that I've seen. They're all very unique and each individual story is completely different than the next and the one before
Mhm.
it. And so this one is this is my second favorite in the franchise. So my star rating for it is a 7.5. And I really like it. It's one that I've seen. I've seen this one the most out of the franchise. And then like my top favorite's like VHS 94. That's like my absolute favorite. But this one's really, really well done. And I remember the first time I saw this, I didn't really know how to take it because it was so unique. And it
Mhm.
kind of takes these things and pushes these boundaries out a little more than at the time that I saw this one, I was used to. And so I remember like seeing it for the first time and not knowing if I liked it or not. And it took me a little while to kind of realize just how much I liked it. And now I
Mhm.
appreciate it on like a completely different level than I did the first time I ever saw it.
Yeah, it's funny because the reason that I have such connection to it is that it came out in 2012. I
Mm-hmm.
don't remember hearing about it, but you know
Yeah.
that happens.
Yeah.
And it's funny because actually my husband and I were in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, around March of 2014 because my father had fallen very ill very quickly. So we were kind of staying at his and my stepmother's house, waiting things out.
Yeah.
And we were in my old bedroom in this tiny bed, and we're just uncomfortable, and we can't sleep, and we're stressed, and it's just horrible.
Yeah.
And we had the TV on, and we were just kind of watching because they had every paid channel you can think of. They just were like, we're just going to get everything. So
Yeah.
we literally stumbled upon it. It was
Oh,
late in the middle of the night. We couldn't sleep, and we just looked at it, and we didn't know what it was. We thought it was a documentary, and
yeah.
it was late, so we were like half asleep. So we saw it went from I don't even remember if we saw the very beginning with the frame narrative, the tape 56. But
Mm-hmm.
we started by watching Amateur Night.
Okay.
Um, and as it's progressing, I'm like half asleep, so I'm thinking, is this real? Is this real? And I'm like, I'm terrified. And I'm like, is this real? Did they find this? What's happening? I can't go outside now.
Yeah.
And I'm freaking out. But then we're hooked. And then
Yeah.
we're watching it, and we're kind of talking to each other like, oh my God, oh, did you see that? Kind of thing. And look behind her. And we were just excited. And it gave us kind of an outlet, something else to think
Yeah.
about and to concentrate on with all this real life horror around us.
Yeah.
It was this creative, energetic, interesting form of film. And I had been a fan of found footage since Blair Witch.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of dating myself, but my dad especially loved taking videotapes, and we actually found some tapes at the old house and
Mhm.
watched them. And my husband hooked up the VCR, and I've watched so many found footage horror movies. And I even tweeted this, that as soon as the tape starts and you get the tracking, I'm thinking, oh yeah, this is gonna be good. And it's like a birthday party. Nothing
Right.
happens. But,
Right.
I honestly, like, it's like you're so ready for something like, okay, something's gonna happen. It's like, no, it's just literally my uncle's like drinking beer while I'm opening my gifts. It's boring, but
Yeah.
it found footage is, and I know it's like kind of a love-hate thing in the
Hmm.
genre,
Yeah.
but I feel like when it hits, it really hits because it forces you to be creative, to use different methods. And like you said, I can't think of a single. I mean, some are better than others. Just some, and some I think I just enjoy more than others as far as all these segments.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
there's no one that isn't creative, that isn't interesting, that doesn't leave you reeling in some way or thinking about it.
I agree.
And that is extraordinary for any series of any genre of anything. And to keep going and to have, so I was so excited when I saw there's a new film coming out. I'm like, well, I'm there. That's
Oh yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
I'll
So
keep
yeah.
watching these as long as they make them. Like
Oh yeah.
they just posted the poster for 85 like the other day. And I was
Mhm.
like, you make as many of these as you want to. Like I
Yes.
will continue because I like there was kind of like a lull between was it Viral and VHS 94? I think those are the
Yeah.
last two. So there's kind of
Mhm.
like a gap of time. And then I
Mhm.
think when they did VHS 94 and people loved it, they were like, we should probably keep doing this. And then it was like,
Yes.
so now we just got 94 last year, I think. And then now we've
Yeah.
got 99 and then next year we'll have 85. And I think like it's crazy because one of the things I always hear people gripe about is that there's nothing unique in horror anymore. Like everything is the same. We're redoing franchises that should have been dead a long time ago. There's always these complaints, but I don't think that anything with VHS has ever been that way. Like it's
Mhm.
always something different. And I think what's funny is because like when I saw I'm also a really big fan of Blair Witch. And I remember like when once I realized how much I really enjoyed VHS, there was like virtually no one to talk about it with because it's
Mhm.
not like a super mainstream film. And
Yeah.
it definitely didn't get attention like they're starting to now. And so there was like no one to talk about VHS with. And then it
Mhm.
was kind of like that with found footage in general for a long time. Like a lot of people are like, it's like my least favorite genre. I saw Cloverfield. I've never seen another found footage movie, and there's all this hate on it. So it's
Yeah.
been really cool being able to hear different perspectives on found footage now because I've had such a love for it for so long. So it's
Mhm.
crazy. Like everybody has, I think, like their comfort horror, their horror that like is meaningful to them, like you said. And it's really cool hearing you talk about what this one is for you because this was one, like I said, I had to sit on for a little while, but I have mad respect for this franchise. Like I think the storytelling in this one. So this one has like a little bit of everything. And then there's like the end sequence, which we're going to get into spoilers in a little bit, but the end sequence was like one of those things where I felt like they saved up like a lot of the I guess we'll call it like I guess like the effect stuff. Like a lot of everything that they did looked so good, but so much of it was practical. And I'm all about like practical effects. With found footage, it's usually lower budget, so they just kind of have to do what they can do. But I remember even when I wasn't sure about it, seeing the final our last like little thing at the end of the first one and thinking like it gave me like Grave Encounters vibes. Like parts of it were very like it was really unique and different, but also still kind of familiar, which had me really intrigued by it. And it's a fantastic franchise in general. I really like it a lot. And the original was one that I felt like really broke ground for horror anthologies in general, whether they're found footage or not. It set like a new standard for me. Because now I go into them like, all right, show me how unique you can make every single thing that you do, because they've done it so well.
Yeah, they definitely set the bar really high. I mean, they kind of came out of the gate running, and it's really just so impressive because because sometimes the whole thing with found footage is that you have to have, obviously, well, with any film, but especially in horror and like sci-fi, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I've always said that sci-fi is horror's nerdy cousin.
I like that.
But it's kind of like you have to have the suspension of disbelief of, okay, they're these people able to fly, they're time travelers, that sort of thing. Like, okay, but you can make that work if you have a narrative that is cohesive. And they build on it, and each segment builds on it in a realistic way, so you feel like you're really watching something. Like when we're watching the tapes and each story unfolds, it doesn't make that leap that it feels desperate. Each new scene is building on the last one, even in ways that you wouldn't think are happening, but makes sense later. You're like, oh, that's why when he went to the window and that makes it creepier, and just that having that richness is really, it's rewarding. And it makes, even when what's going to happen, you've seen a million times, we were rewatching and I still was kind of jumping of like, oh, I forgot about that, or oh yeah, there's something I haven't seen before. And it's just so creative, and I just have nothing but the most respect for the crews and the casts for that, because they really delivered, and it was not an easy task, but they did it.
Yeah, I think, I think the acting is definitely something that sells these stories. Because, like, I think, like, and it's funny because some of the characters, especially like in Amateur Night, like, there's a couple of characters that you're just like, oh, like they come on, and you're like, oh, of course, like, but there are people like that. They're not made up. They're realistically annoying. They're realistically despicable. And that actually just makes you care a little bit more, I think, about like what's going on, because like they are so realistic. Like, and I think like, everything seems to happen at such a natural pace, which is really well done too. And I mean, they really do put a lot of, I think all of these films in the VHS franchise are definitely labors of love. You can tell that they put a lot of thought into everything that happens, every piece of dialogue, every movement of the camera, like everything is just really well thought out, and it makes for a really effective experience.
It's really impressive too that these segments are quite short, but you learn the characters so quickly. Like with Amateur Night, we're watching it, we're just like groaning, and I'm like, man, I went to college with like guys like this. And everyone knows guys like this. Everyone who's gone out drinking knows guys like this. And I don't know if I'm misremembering, but I think I heard or I read an interview with might have been David Bruckner or the writer Nicholas, I think I want to say Tchaikovsky, or somebody behind the film. I want to say that they said that one of the guys was actually very shy in real life. I'm like, well, if he is, then he needs to like get out acting more, because wow, you would not guess that because these guys are so obnoxious, and they're drunk and they're loud, but they're people, and you don't want anything necessarily bad to happen to them. You just want them to shut up and sit down. And then when things start unfolding, you're like, oh my God, and you're just like, get out of there, run. And it just feels so real. And then just the pacing and the way the camera's moving,
Yeah.
And it's just, if it's the fact that it feels real,
Hmm.
it gets your heart pounding and everything. And just knowing that you have no idea what's going to happen next, because it just, when the film starts, even with the group of hooligans doing their thing, and it's very Clockwork Orange, and you
Yes.
figure, oh, these guys are going to get some sort of comeuppance, but you have no idea what it is. But even those guys, they're not good people. They're really
Right.
not, and they demonstrate that in so many ways.
Yeah.
But you're not necessarily wanting anything bad to happen to them, and you just get to know the characters so well in such a short amount of time. It's
Hmm.
really impressive that just within a few minutes you're thinking, well, he's not going to do this, he's going to do
Yeah.
this. And sometimes you're surprised, but it's never something that's like, well, that's out of character, or that's a 180. You
Right.
don't get that. And that's really, to have that compact in each of the
Yeah.
segments is really something. You don't really see that too much anywhere. So it's impressive to get
No.
that consistently in a franchise and in a film. So it's
Yeah.
really, it's very, this franchise is just very rewarding. So
Yeah.
I try to tell people, even if you don't really like found footage, you need to at
Give it a
least
chance.
just, yeah, exactly. Just
Yeah.
suspend your disbelief. Just watch it. It's, trust me, you're gonna enjoy. If you don't enjoy any of this, then I don't know what to say. But there's got to be something. I mean,
Yeah.
but it's really, because it's different kinds of horror too,
It is.
um, which is really surprising.
Hmm.
Because sometimes, like especially with anthologies, you feel like they almost get locked into something,
Like a
and it's like,
theme. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like, oh, it's gonna be, let me guess, this person's a werewolf, and it's like, no,
Right.
not necessarily. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's nice to be surprised, especially, if you've been a horror fan for so long and you feel like you've seen
Hmm.
everything.
Right.
And this franchise and this film is like, you think you've seen everything, but we're about to show you something extraordinary that you are not going to forget. And it's really exciting to see that, and to be an audience member and be part of that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even just to kind of comment on what you said about like getting to know the characters so quickly. I mean, I've seen 2-hour movies where I didn't get invested in characters because there was no
Mhm.
development, or the way that they were developed didn't make any sense and was choppy at best. Like I've seen films like that. And honestly, like at least for me personally, I kind of need a connection. I need a reason to care about what I'm watching. And like I can watch mindless stuff too, but I have to, like, most of my preferences for things that I really enjoy are things that I get connected to on like a personal level. Like,
Mhm.
and like with, I guess like specifically with Amateur Night, like I was like more connected to I guess like the girl, like as far as like people that I just was like curious about and invested in. I was like, okay, like what's the situation here? Like this seems odd, but maybe it's not odd. Are they the problem? Like, I kind of went back
Mhm.
and forth on like what was going to actually happen, because they do kind of toe the line with the guys about this, like how awful are they going to make these guys? Like how far are
Yeah.
they going to take this part? And I think that like I kind of need that, and if they do it so well in all of the short stories that they tell, and it's really a testament to the writing and the acting, because I've done,
Mhm.
like I said, I've seen so many movies that it's one movie the whole time, or one story the whole time, and I didn't care about a single person the entire time, and it just disrupts me caring about the rest of the story, or the things that are supposed to be like, anxiety ridden or scary. Like I lose some of that because I don't care about what happens to the people. And so, like, to your point, they do this really well in VHS, to where you do genuinely want to know what's going to happen, and you do actually care about what the outcome is.
Definitely, because and this is going to sound like snobby, but maybe it's because I am an actor, but it really frustrates me as an actor and as a writer when I
Mhm.
see a movie and there's no chemistry whatsoever.
Yeah.
And for 2 hours, I'm like, how long did it take you to shoot this movie and you didn't have any chemistry? I mean,
Right.
just, there's got to be a way that there's something. And it's so frustrating. And then I end up getting like annoyed with that, because it's like,
Yeah.
well, I just wasted 2 hours of my time
Yeah.
on this. And with this, even if you don't necessarily like buy into, oh, this may be the supernatural part of it or something, you believe
Mhm.
these characters, you believe the relationships that they have with
You
each
do.
other,
Yep.
and you kind of start rooting for them. And the adage is that if you're writing something, the reader or the viewer has to care about the characters, otherwise it's pointless. With horror, that's especially true because something bad is going to happen because it's
At some
horror.
point. Yep.
And you have to care what happens, even if they're bad people. Like you said, like it's they're pretty bad in the Tape 56 and the Amateur Night. These are
Yeah.
pretty bad people.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when things start happening to them, it's still terrifying because you're that whole primal feeling of, get out of there, run, do
Mm-hmm.
something,
Yeah.
you're in
Survive.
danger. That's something that you really can't manufacture, even though people seem to think that you can. It has
Mm-hmm.
to come, it has to feel real.
Yeah.
And ironically, found footage, sometimes when it misses, it just feels like it's just kind of a device rather than a tool to tell the
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
And there's so many ways that it can be created, because people are saying, well, how many more times, how many different ways can you do it? It's like people keep finding ways, and there's always something. And like I was saying earlier with the suspension of disbelief of, well, why would someone keep filming at this point?
Yeah.
It's like, well, some of those segments answer that question of
They
why they
do.
would keep filming, and it's very, very creative answers. So it's really, it kind of
Mm-hmm.
adds that level of realness. But yeah, it doesn't force a connection. The
No.
connection's going to come as you keep watching, because
Yeah.
it's not just the fact that it's a camera on these people, but the fact that these characters feel real, and there's that humanizing aspect to it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fascinating how the one of the segments ends and you're like, oh my god, and it goes into the next one and you're immediately into that next one,
Yep.
invested. So
Yep.
that's it just kind of, it's almost like whiplash with this film series, especially with the first one. It's just it doesn't relent.
Yeah.
But it's rewarding though.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's definitely the payoff is really high for these, I think, too. Yeah, so we'll jump into spoilers talking about VHS. So if you've made it this far in the video and you haven't seen VHS, they currently are all on Hulu, including 94, which is interesting because it's a Shutter, but I don't know how that works. But it's all of them are on Hulu, including 94. If not, I think 94 is also still in Shutter. But I do recommend the franchise if you have not seen any at this point. We are going to spoil and talk about some of the segments a little more detail, giving some stuff away. So just that's my marker for spoilers. So out of the segments for the first one, do you have like a favorite? Like, what's your favorite segment from the first one?
I like all. I mean, they're all interesting. I would probably go with Amateur Night just because that's the one that we were watching that sucked us in, that we were like, what is this?
Yeah.
And it's so strange. And I've had like conversations with other people and my husband about it of, well, what is she? Because you don't know. And my husband's like, I think she's a succubus. I'm like,
Yeah.
maybe, yeah, that's what I was thinking. And it kind of it's almost like it uses humor, but in a way that's unexpected, because at first you're thinking like, you immediately are like, well, she seems odd, but you think she's
Immediately.
just a murderer. And
Yeah.
then you notice that as it goes forward, the line comes more pronounced.
Yes.
And it's kind of an inside joke between me and my husband. I'm sure it is with other people that will text each other, will say, I like you. And because she's just so creepy when she does that. Just the blank stare. I'll try to, it's just
I
like,
know. And
like,
she
is
looks
she
really
drunk or
close when
she?
she says it, and like, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, what's her deal? And then you realize, oh, she's trying to act human.
And
It's
she,
Yeah. And then
aren't we all?
yeah, yeah. Hey, I got my coffee. I'm moving toward it. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's the fact too that it kind of turns things on its head, because um not to get too into like something, but I don't really care for horror that is just people getting hurt. Um, I think there's a time and place for that, but if that's all it is, I don't really care for that. There's definitely ones that have extreme visceral, uh, vicious deaths and such, and torture and such, but it serves a narrative. It's artistic. They're
Yeah.
saying something, they're making comment. I would say Martyrs is like that.
Yes.
Um,
I love
but I
murder.
don't like it when it's just kind of there for there, like, oh, we're gonna make people upset, and it's almost
Right.
always violence against women. and it's like, okay. And
Yep.
with this, it's extremely very much turned on its head. And there's a certain scene where she's with a character and she does something, and every time my husband goes, duh. It's like, yeah, it's like, I'm not a guy, but yeah, that's
And
brutal.
then she chunks it.
Yep, just like, yeah.
I
So
really
it's
wish
almost
my
like,
cat would get settled. Hold on. He's like trying to lay down and he's moving everything in the process. Are you good? Don't look at me like that. I know the laptop's super warm. What a pain. Are you comfortable? Stop. Okay. Anyway, sorry. Every
oh,
time he gets up here, he moves like 30 things, but the fan, pushes out the heat. So he wants to, yeah, you. Anyway, yeah, that part got me, that part made me really uncomfortable too. I actually think for an opening, for our first, like, it, other than like our build up to our like initial bigger story, like I thought that one was like really like a slap, like it just like woke you up, like you like start watching it. And I definitely thought that this was going to be, I thought it was going to be something different. And then when it turns out that she isn't quite what she appears, and she's like tearing into that guy, one of my favorite parts about that one is the leap from the bed to the floor. That was so well done. And it looked 100% natural. Like it looked so good on camera. That's like my favorite part of that one. I loved that part.
The part where she's posing too and just kind of hissing. And I immediately thought of Lilith, like the story of Lilith, and which is, if you're not well versed in lore of that kind, it's definitely worth looking into, because it's fascinating. It's like, so it could be a number of things, and it could be a type of monster we don't know about, kind of, or an emblem of different things. But it's just really interesting to see how she shifts, literally and figuratively, and changes the narrative. It's so visceral without being corny. And it's just terrifying. And the scene too, where he falls down the stairs and then she's kind of just there, and he opens his eyes and she's looking at him. It's like, oh God. And you're
it
just
was
like
so
frozen.
unsettling. Yeah.
And you're just frozen with him, and you're like, oh God, this is going to end horribly. But when he's like running down and like banging on doors and trying to get help, you feel like you're there with him.
Yeah.
And it's oh God, it's terrifying. It really is. It's like, because there's no escape. And that's the ultimate horror thing of like, there's no escape. You can't get away. You're doomed.
All of that sense of hopelessness, like you feel all of that from the moment he leaves the room, and then she ends up, on the stairs, and then leading out to outside. You feel that sense of like, this is it. Like there is no like happy ending to this situation. Like whatever's about to happen is bad. And it's smart too, because when she picks him up and they're flying off, and it has like a reason for the cut camera, which is appreciated, but it also, like, they're smart in like the quick viewing of her in this different form with like these wings. And because anytime that you see too much, you either become desensitized, you can start picking it apart, or two, you see that it isn't really well done actually. So it's like the blips of it are very effective, because you're like, oh my God, what was that? But you don't have enough time to like actually go, okay, I know 100% what I was just looking at. And I think that also makes that really effective.
It's also the added fear of the height, because I don't necessarily have a fear of heights, but to imagine yourself in that situation, just the added fear of, if you, it's like, okay, if I fall like out of the window on a first story apartment, I might get hurt. It's like, well, I'm on the 12th floor, so if I fall, it'd be very bad. If I'm that high up, I'm going to be splat. So, and just that terror of just being out of your element in all sorts of ways. And I agree 100%. Like, what you don't see is more terrifying. That's why I was kind of relieved with the first Blair Witch thing. You never see the witch. And because what your mind imagines is far more terrifying than anything anyone could film ever. Because it's just, your mind just goes to that place that scares you, and it's just but so you get an idea of, well, I think I get an idea of what she is, but not necessarily.
Not enough.
Yeah. it's just like, oh God,
And then it
it's
leaves it
freaky.
open too, because then you're like, well, what happens after that? Because we don't
Yeah,
know. We don't know. Does he accidentally fall and actually become Splat? Does she take him away and do other things? Like, we don't
yeah,
know. Like, and that's another thing that, and it leaves you hanging, which is, I think, carries into what you were talking about. How when you go into the next story, you're already
mhm,
like, okay, like what in the world is going on? And so by the time you get to the next one, it's like, okay, like, you don't really get like a too much of a break, because you're still built up without very many answers, which is super
mhm.
effective in these. It's not one of those like frustrated, I don't know what's going on. It's like a very good, like, I love that I didn't have all the answers at the end of that.
Hmm. Yeah, and with Amateur Night, I know that that's one of the top one favorites of my husband because he was I had to like go downstairs or something, so I missed like a smidge of it because I'm like, I need to run downstairs real quick, and I'll be right back.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then so I came up, I'm like, what I miss? And because we already saw that you get this sense like, okay, they're in either I think they were in Arizona.
Hmm.
Um and yeah, they're wandering around, and you know that they're on like a romantic holiday or their honeymoon, but there's tension there. They're arguing in a way that's, either if you either been in a relationship like that or you've seen people argue like that, and you're just like that whole ickiness of like, can we not? Um, so he said, I remember my husband told me, well, he was walking around the cliffs and you almost wondered if he fell, and she almost seemed like she didn't care. And I was like,
Hmm.
what? And then so it just seemed weird. And then you're thinking, oh God, that there's a drifter who's after them. And then at the very end, it's just like, I did not see that coming. That's so cool. And you try to watch again for clues, but it's just so fascinating. And the fact too, the very last scene where she looks over at her lover and says,
Hmm.
did you erase it? And she looks totally different than when she did in the earlier parts of the segment. She looks like a completely different person, and
Different
it's
person.
really
Yeah.
it's jarring. Like, oh my
Yeah.
God, because it's like, so are they? Because it looks like there's snow on the ground. Are they running away to Canada? What's going on? It's like you don't know, and you'll never know. It's freaky,
Yeah,
but
and I think with that one, I think the closeness of the betrayal is unsettling, because like
mhm,
you don't really like, at least for me, I never really liked the husband. Like, I
no,
just instantly, like, they do this really good job of like almost making you, which I think is intentional. You don't tend to favor him. You're like,
no,
he's kind of like being disrespectful. He's making snarky comments. He seems a little bit like there might be some things that we're not being exposed to yet that are not very healthy on his side specifically. So you
mhm,
like, naturally, when I was watching it, I was on like her side of it. Like, I immediately was like, okay, she's like this girl is like putting up with like a lot. Like, where is this going? Like, and I didn't expect that ending like
yeah,
at all. And I was just kind of like, when it showed, like you said, they show like this random person outside, and it's, and then they're gone, and then you see the shots of them sleeping, and at first you almost think it's the wife,
that's
and
what
then
I thought. Yeah,
like long enough for you to think that, and then it does that pan over where you're like, oh, not so much, like, it just, and it's very interesting, because they did just a really good job of like building it to this like stranger, imposing on this like getaway of this couple or whatever, and then it turns into something totally different, which was like, I really liked that one a lot too. I think when I saw this, probably maybe like my second go round, I used to think that my favorite was the last one with the haunted house with the possession story. Like, I
oh
thought
yeah,
that one, I'm like a sucker for possession stories, and anything that has to do with like religious themes like that, it's like an immediate, like, it automatically usually gets higher rankings for me, because I love stuff like that. But that one was like my favorite for the longest. And then I think I kind of, for lack of a better term, I grew up a little bit. And I think I started kind of looking at things differently when I watched horror, particularly when it had to come with things that had to do with stories built around women. And that was actually when mine changed to the first one, the one about the could be succubus. Like, I actually would say now that that was probably my favorite as well, just because I look at that stuff so different now than I used to. And I'm very weird about like nudity in horror. Like it has to have like a point. Like I can't just
Yeah.
watch stuff for the sake of like it's just not my cup of tea. And so like when I remember going into it thinking it was just going to be this like sex filled like segment, and I was kind of like turned off by it. And then I realized much later after seeing it multiple times and just paying attention, that there's so much more going on to that one, and the depth to the story was a lot more than I thought it was. So now that's probably more like my favorite. And then I think if I had to say like of the segments for this one particularly, I think the weakest for me is the one in the woods. I don't know all the names of the segments, but the one where they're with the
Tuesday
glitch.
the 17th. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one that I felt like, I didn't like it at all. The first time I saw it, I was like, I didn't like that one. But then I watched it again, and now I just like them all. But I think that was one that I wasn't as connected to as I was some of the other ones.
I like that one just because the effects are, it's a different take on things, of the fact
Yes.
that like this glitch monster
Mm-hmm.
is almost human but not, and it's weird, and it's the way that it like flashes back and you see the dead bodies. I thought it was pretty interesting. It's kind of like, it almost starts as a satire, and you're like, what is this? Because there's humor in it, and it's kind of
Yes.
silly, and it has literally the tropes of like the loud jock, the nerdy friend, the hot blonde,
Yeah.
the final girl, and it kind of almost makes fun of that in a way, but in a way
Yeah.
that's also respectful,
Yeah.
because when she propositions Joey and she's like, they're gone, want to have sex, and he's like, what? And,
Uh,
it's like, well, what were you talking about before with the murders? And then she's like, oh yeah, I brought you here as bait. And it's like, what? And it's just really strange, but it's interesting, and I like how they use the sound too with that,
mhm.
because you get that feedback. It's like, well, what is this? Is this some sort of monster that's like using the technology
Mhm.
to like form itself? It's kind of, I thought it was pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard for me to really say which one is my least favorite because I like them all.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know if I really have a least favorite. I think the one, because I can't even really pick, because if I were to say, oh, the one we haven't talked about yet was the one with the aliens. I think it's called The Sick Thing That Happened to Emily When She Was Younger. Um,
Yeah.
I wasn't sure about that one, but then it's like it builds so well because you see the kids in the background. And you're like, whoa, and little things kind of freak me out because I'm afraid of dolls. So it's like, ugh.
Yeah.
And then just knowing how, like, what the real story is, that basically these women are alien incubators, and the practical effects. And I love
Yes.
practical effects. I'm a huge
Yes.
practical effects girl, because
Yep.
I have nothing against CGI. It has its time and place, but
Sure.
when it's bad, it's horrible.
It
And
ruins it. Yeah. Yeah.
they just had a re-release of The Thing in theaters, and we went because that's one of my top favorite movies.
Mhm.
Um, and it holds up. And that was done a long time ago.
Yes.
And I'm dating myself because that's almost how old I am, but still, it holds up. Practical effects hold up. I even saw they did a re-release of what was it? The werewolf with Lon Chaney, and then Dracula. Those, of course, use practical effects, and
Yeah.
those hold up from
Yeah.
back
The
then.
Universal monsters. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's a Jekyll and Hyde one, and I
Mhm.
forget the actor's name, but with when his face changes. To this day, that's still like, how did they do that? And when it's good, it makes you react to what's happening rather than, oh, that's pretty good effects, because you don't want that.
Right.
You
That's
want,
not the goal. Yeah.
when she's digging into her arm, it looks so real.
Oh, yeah.
And you cringe, and she keeps doing it. It's like, he's like, stop. And you're thinking, and you notice later that he doesn't say, you need to go to the hospital. He just tells her, oh,
I'll
I'll look
do
at it
it.
when I
I'll
get
take
home.
care of it. I'll look
You know,
at it.
yeah, when I get home, I'll look at that. It's like, if you were having a chat with somebody, like if right now you were like, oh, by the way, I'd be like, oh,
Certainly did.
I'm gonna like call 911 and then like find out where you are and send them to you, because you
Yeah.
cannot be digging around in yours. That's horrible.
Yeah.
And this is your loved one doing it too. So, anyone else, you'd be like, you need to go to the hospital immediately, because that's not normal. And you're like digging at yourself. And there's like hints that she had done something like that in her past. Um, but yeah, the effects are done, like you said, just when you need just a glimpse, you get just a glimpse.
Yeah.
And you, of course, people can say, well, I would have done this different, I would have done this differently. And even like the frame narrative where the old man, and I think it's supposed to be I get they're calling him a pensioner, but basically like a retired guy. I don't know, because he's supposed to, because I know
Yeah.
the one guy was saying like, oh, we can just get this one tape and they'll pay us for it. And they're like, why? He's like, oh no, it's just money. So, but
Yeah.
that flash when you see him screaming as like a zombie monster thing
Or
is
whatever, right?
terrifying.
Yeah.
And it's just that one quick glance, and that's all you need. You don't need to focus and look on every little thing. But yeah,
Yeah. Well, and you
it's
watch him the whole time. You're
yeah.
always looking at him in the background
Hmm.
because then, of course, like you know, eventually something is going to come up. He's not going to be there. He's going to move. He's going to
Yes.
get up. Something is going to happen. And it's paced so well. And you get
Yes.
so wrapped up in the mini segments in the process of
Hmm.
that you like almost kind of forget that that's what you're waiting on. And then it happens and he's not there
Yes.
anymore. And you're like, oh, that's right. Like you get kind of like yanked back in. Yeah, I thought
Hmm.
that part was really well done too. And I like too, I feel like these in general, all of them do a really good job of conveying a story without just blurting out a bunch of information. Like you get
Hmm.
these, especially with the Emily story, because you literally are not spoon fed a single thing. Like a
Hmm.
lot of it, because you originally are like, oh, haunted, like apartment, right? Like you think, okay,
Yeah.
little children, ghost, whatever, yeah, that's creepy. But then it like takes you, it like turns it on its head and it goes into like this whole other direction. And I'm like, and and of course, when he comes into the room at the, I think it's like the living room, like when he found the, like
Yeah.
the big reveal, you're like, what the hell? Like, are you kidding me? And it's like, he's part of
Exactly.
it. And there's all these things. And they've known each other for a really long time since childhood. And you're just
Hmm.
like, no one is safe. Like it just is
Yes.
such a different feeling to the story, but it story tells in such a way that it's almost like playing a video game where you get these little things here or
Hmm.
there and you're just given these pieces and it builds and builds and builds. It's not just like, we haven't told you anything. Here's an info dump of information that you need to understand what's going on. And I think that that's just like, that's a testament to smart writing. Like it's so well done.
100%. I despise info dumping in any form
Yes.
because I'm sorry, it's lazy.
It's
It's
lazy.
bad writing. There's no excuse for it. I don't care unless you're
Yeah.
doing like a parody.
Sure.
That's literally the only time
Yeah.
that's going to work. And
Yeah.
someone recently had a tweet and I retweeted this saying, like sometimes movie dialogue is like, oh, hi, John, you're my favorite brother. How is it going on the farm that you've been working at for 5 years? And how's your wife, Emily, who you're not getting along with, you might get divorced from? And it's like, because we've all seen that. We've been
So
through
true.
like movies or plays like that where it's like, oh, this is just brutal. It's like, oh, come on.
Take
But
the
with
time.
that, yeah, you learn of, they'll just kind of give those little clues of like, oh, remember when I was a kid and this happened, and and it's like, oh, okay, so he's a doctor. Okay, so he's far away, and they've been together for like a while.
Hmm.
Okay, and okay, there's something weird going on in the background, and well, why is she staying there? And what's going on with her arm?
Yeah.
And then when he opens that, because he gets out up and runs away, and you thinking, oh, he's gonna go get his phone.
He's finally going to go do something
Yes.
useful.
And then he enters the room, and it's like, what is happening? And you're
Yeah.
just like stunned. You're watching it like, what? And then he's talking to the alien children, like, I got to make this look like an accident. And, this thing is half human. And it's like, oh, and it's very X-Files, but and I love the X-Files. I
Yeah.
was like the hugest fan when I was a
Yeah.
kid.
Yeah.
Um, but oh my gosh, it is just freaky. And the thing that really cements and you feel so bad for her too when she was saying like, you shouldn't be with me, you should be with somebody else. And he's
Someone
like,
more
I want to be with you.
normal.
And then she's like, ugh. And he's like, this guy's awful. And then he goes on to his next girlfriend
Yep.
who he's got the chip in, and it's like,
Yep.
oh, he's like farming these people. It's really just it's sickening, but it's also you want to know more. And that's, I think, the great thing about these films, and especially the first
Yeah.
one, like you want to know what happens next, even though you don't need to know. Like you have these questions like what happens to the guy? Does she take him to a nest? Does she kill him? Does she eat him?
Yeah. Who,
Does she
yeah, we
use
don't
him
know.
for
Yeah.
breeding? You know,
Yeah.
is he like going to be her breeding person? Or what happens with the couple that escapes? Do they make it to Canada, wherever they're going? Do they ever get caught? Do they do this to other people? Is she gonna like marry other guys and they kill him for whatever reason. I mean, there's all these questions of like, well, what the heck was going on? It's like, okay, so like with the 10/31/98 with the Halloween party, so
Mm-hmm.
was she actually like evil? Was she actually a witch? Was she possessed? Was she even human? Was she even there? You know, there's all these different stories. So you're wanting to know more,
Yeah.
but at the
Mhm.
same time you're satisfied with not knowing more. So
Yeah.
it's which is, you know, I kind of like when things aren't answered, especially in horror, because it's scarier. It's more interesting and strange. I mean,
Yep.
I'm a huge fan of Shirley Jackson. She's absolutely one of my absolute top writers, and her stories will just end with like just like a gut punch of
Mm.
I have no idea how this character got to this point. There's so many unanswered questions, but it's so satisfying because it's so
Yeah.
creepy. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just my God. And you know, so I kind of like knowing that there's, because that's how real life is too. You have these unanswered questions
Yeah.
of, well, how do we get to this point and what happens next? And these are just, you know, compacted so well that it's still satisfying. It still is a complete story,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's part of a larger story. And you can tell that there's layers to it that you're never gonna even be privy to. So it's pretty cool.
Well, cool. Well, thank you
Yeah,
so much for making time to come talk. This has
yeah,
been
thank
a
you.
blast. We'll have to talk. We'll have to pick other movies to talk about. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I appreciate you letting me talk and go on and on about
No, I
VHS.
love
Like
it.
I said,
Yeah.
it's you know, it means a lot to me personally. It's almost
Yeah.
like you know, certain films or books or
Yeah.
songs that are there for you during a hard
They
time.
just like,
This was literally there for me during the worst time in my life,
yeah.
and it's a comfort. So it's literally my comfort movie, and it just feels, it's almost like um and I remember this is kind of unrelated, but I was watching the original Nightmare on Elm Street with my
Mhm.
husband. We were watching it a few years ago, and I said, you know, I hear that music, do, 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 and it's like I feel like I'm visiting an old friend.
I know what you mean.
And it's like it doesn't make sense to those outside who aren't fans of the genre, but those who know, if you know, you
Get it.
know, kind of that
You get
what
it. Yeah.
people say, if you know,
No,
you
that's
know.
true.
But it's very much that comfort of, you know, this was here when you needed something, a distraction, a
Yeah.
release, and it's still rewarding. It's not just a distraction anymore. It's its own thing. So
I agree.
you know, it's close to my heart. I absolutely love, and I have nothing but the most respect for everyone involved with the
Yeah. Me
films.
too.
So, and I would love to be a part of one day, whether it's an
Yeah.
actor or writer. And I actually have just thought of an idea for a found footage movie a few nights ago. I'm like, I need to write something. So,
Yeah.
but it's just so much fun. I absolutely love
Yeah.
it. So yeah.
Well, I'm glad that we talked about this one then, because obviously
Yeah.
when we discussed it, I didn't know that it meant anything like that to that
Mhm.
level. So I'm glad that we talked about this one too, because I know we talked, there was, I think there was like a couple others mentioned, but like I was like,
Mhm.
oh, VHS is coming out. So I'm glad we talked about this one then. That worked
Yeah,
out really well. Yeah. Cool.
definitely.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for coming.
Thank you.
I'm gonna put all of Christina's information in the description for this episode, so you can go give her a follow and check out all the stuff that she does. And that's our thoughts on VHS 2012. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us on this Saturday. Hope you have a good rest of your weekend. Enjoy your week, and I will see you in the next one.